Coming up next, this week in computer hardware, new Haswell CPUs, the word on Nvidia's 337.50 driver update, desktop monitor upgrades, and hey, performance can scale with memory speed. It's all coming up next on Twitch.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
Bandwidth for Twitch is provided by CacheFly at CACHEFLY.com.
This is Twitch, This Week in Computer Hardware, episode 263, recorded April 17th, 2014. Driver mayhem and CPU surprises.
This episode of This Week in Computer Hardware is brought to you by iFixit. You can fix it, and iFixit makes it easy with free step-by-step repair guides, high-quality replacement parts, and all the tools you'll need. For $10 off your purchase of $50 or more, go to ifixit.com/twit and enter the code TWITCH at checkout.
Welcome to Twitch, This Week in Computer Hardware, Twitch's weekly show that aims to bring you the most useful, most important, most exciting, most thrilling, most scintillating, and most useful information in hardware news and question answering. And after that eloquent introduction, I'd like to bring you the man, the myth, the legend himself, Mr. Ryan Shrout, who's been waiting patiently while I got the internet turned back on.
Sometimes the internet doesn't agree with you, and you gotta push it around a little bit. And but it seems you've got everything wrangled back under control. You got that leash back on it.
Oh my goodness! No comment. There's a binding arbitration between myself and the internet. I'm not allowed to discuss our mutually beneficial relationship that has advanced the health and welfare of my children, family, and of course, humanity in general.
Of course.
If you're looking for a 1 terabyte SSD drive, Mr. Ryan Shrout was pointing out before the show, prices have been lower by nearly $100.
Wait, no, I didn't say that. What?
I thought you said that you'd seen it as, I thought you said, okay, so 120 gigabyte SSDs, the 840 Evo, easily well under $100 right now. 250 gigabytes selling for about $154 on Amazon, and has been for the last 12 hours, as near as we can tell. Those prices will vary probably as soon as you walk up to Amazon with your credit card. It'll go up because, Amazon knows everything.
That's what they do.
1 terabyte SSDs, I think they're selling for $539. Did you say you've seen them as low as $449?
So no, they're selling for $554, and I've seen them as low as $439. So okay. I always try to keep an eye out and let people know when I see them at either the lowest price I've seen them for, or for a new low price that I've never seen before. They're pretty close now. I mean, you're under 50 cents per gig for a 1 terabyte SSD. $450 is a lot to pay for a storage device, of course, but all things considered, I mean, you can get a 500 gig for $254. Mm-hmm. So that I think is within most kind of enthusiast ranges. And again, you're getting a really fast SSD, and maybe you don't have to worry about moving your Steam games around and stuff. You're still going to need external storage if you download a lot of videos and photos and things that you may be backing up from your machine. But these are still great prices. It's hard to complain. Yeah. It really is.
Especially given where the prices were just a year ago. I like the prices falling. With an EVGA Hadron Air and GeForce GTX 750, bit.ly, well, I should say bit.ly/PC per contest 01. Are you required to send in blood or box tops for this?
We accept box tops from Stouffer's and General Mills cereals. I'm not going to give you the address. Just mail them, put my name on the envelope, see if they make it here. bit.ly/PC per contest 01. I created that URL really just for the people that listen to the show rather than watch it. Just a quick mention of it. EVGA is a sponsor of ours, and they're letting us give away a Hadron Air, which is a mini ITX case. It's really cool. It comes with an integrated 500, maybe 550 watt power supply, like a 1U power supply. And then a GTX 750 graphics card to go along with it. So if you go there, all you have to do is fill out a little form with your name and email address, and we'll randomly pick somebody. And I think a little bit less than 2 weeks to win some free stuff, if you're interested. If you like free stuff. I mean, if you're into that kind of thing.
Well, if I give you my email address, are you going to like send me stuff all the time, or is it a free and unsort of no mayhem or spam implied?
I have zero interest in taking your email addresses from this. This is only so that when I pick the winner, I can email them and say, hey, what's your address? I don't want or need that information. EVGA doesn't need it either. So
I'm just making sure that people know this isn't some
Absolutely.
crazy inverted scheme so Ryan can collect email addresses. Oh my goodness.
Everybody will get Christmas cards from me now as well. So there's that.
That's cool. I'm going to quote Mr. Ryan Shrout, NVIDIA 337.50 driver analysis. Let's see, says Mr. Shrout, if I can start this story without sounding too much like a broken record when compared to the news post I wrote last week on the subject of NVIDIA's new 337.50 driver. In March, while attempting Game Developers Conference to learn about the upcoming DirectX 12 API, I sat down with NVIDIA to talk about changes coming to its graphics driver that would affect current users with shipping DX9, DX10, and DX11 games. So, are you excited about the driver, or are you sort of, boy, I've seen that face before. not this one. Go to the Ryan face.
Yeah. You know, so there's two kind of stories behind it. One is the driver itself, and one is this kind of crap that happened over the weekend between, like, I posted like a really quick news blurb. Yeah, something that looks like that. Something that, like a news blurb on Friday, I think it was, and then some stuff hit the fan and it had to be corrected in part of the story that went out this week. First, the good part. The good part is if you remember, and this is in the murky part where you missed a couple of shows and I missed a couple of shows, so I don't know if we actually talked about this in person, about the potential changes that NVIDIA was making to their driver to improve DX11 efficiency. And they kind of use this as we don't think that AMD creating Mantle is a good idea. We think the direction they're going in is right, but we don't. They disagree that it was a good idea to create a separate API that developers had to work for, rather than preparing for DX12 and doing what NVIDIA says they are doing, which is improving DirectX 11 driver efficiency today. And during GDC, they talked to us about this mystery driver that was going to be coming up and how they were able to improve the efficiency of, certain DirectX 11 functions that were reducing CPU overhead, that were improving performance on existing games, on existing platforms, on the existing API. Fast forward a week or so, and they released the driver as 337.50 beta, and people began kind of testing it and looking at it. And it took me a little while longer to get to it than I would have liked, because we were testing that massive AMD 295X2 dual GPU graphics card. Took priority from me. But we actually wanted to sit down and do some testing with it. And there's no real easy general takeaway from the driver, unfortunately, because much like we saw with early Mantle performance testing, the amount of benefit you get, if any, varies from game to game. It can vary from scene to scene of a game, and it can vary depending on what particular hardware you're running it on. So, we tested it with GTX 780s and SLI, 770s and SLI. We tested it with a 3960X 6-core Sandy Bridge. We tested it with a 4770K quad-core Haswell. We did some single GPU testing. And performance scaling ranged anywhere from 0% up to like 35%. And that, is kind of what we expected based on NVIDIA's claims, although I'll talk about that in a second. We saw scaling, like if you look at Sleeping Dogs or Hitman Absolution, Skyrim, and indoor scenes, but not outdoor scenes. We actually saw pretty significant multi-GPU and single GPU scaling performance improvements with 33750 versus the previous driver, which leads credence to what NVIDIA was saying, that you can optimize your DirectX 11 implementation in select ways to improve performance and efficiency without having to do a whole new API. And that was kind of, their claim. I think NVIDIA went a little bit, they went too far on like the marketing side of it. They were pushing it as this kind of be-all, end-all driver release, really. And it's not really that. It's going to specific games. Like so Battlefield 4, we didn't really see much performance improvement at all. Other games like BioShock Infinite, we saw performance improvements in, on one platform with a single GPU, but not on the SLI configurations. There's a lot of kinds of things that have to fall into place for you to see these benefits. But the fact of the matter is they were able to do something to improve efficiency, even in games where we saw 5% or 4.3 or 6.3 or 3.5. Those percentage increases they're something, and they're worthwhile and they're worth having, but they're not as dramatic as Nvidia maybe had kind of led on for people to believe necessarily. And I would say that the upside to something like this versus what AMD has with Mantle is that this, in theory, applies to all DirectX 11, even DX10 and DX9 games, right? And Mantle can't say that, right? A game has to very specifically be built for Mantle, and it's a lot of work on the developer side. It's a lot of work on the AMD side as well, whereas NVIDIA's goal is to show that we can see similar performance gains, maybe a little bit less, maybe significantly less, but over a wider range of titles than what Mantle can do. And all we have to do is really do this in a way while still preparing for DX12 next year that will kind of level the playing field across the GPUs and the API implementations, really. That was kind of their goal, and they kind of achieved it. Real quick, the drama behind it was I think the slide that we've showed a couple of times, it says like up to 72% scaling in SLI configurations, up to 72% improvement, that is a number quoted using a game called Total War Rome 2, which is a strategy game, very popular, very CPU heavy, and it kind of made sense, right? If you can improve efficiency on a CPU, this is one of the most CPU bound games you'll find. Does this help? The problem is, as it turned out, they were dishonest about where those performance gains were coming from. It was actually an SLI profile change as opposed to the DX11 efficiency change that resulted in that performance delta. And I don't want to say they were just lying about it, because everybody I talked to firmly believed that was the case. And it wasn't until like one person in a driver team somewhere said, hey, wait a minute, what about this? And then everybody else in the company was like, oh no, we were wrong. And they had to kind of go back and recant on that claim. And there's like a statement in the story about that as well. So the cruddy part for me was that my Friday story was based completely on that particular game. So even made me look bad, because I was like, hey, here's these results. NVIDIA promises me that these are because of DX11 efficiency improvements, not SLI improvements. And then on Tuesday, I'm like, well, turns out AMD was wrong, or NVIDIA was wrong, and they told me this incorrectly. They were completely wrong in this matter. And everybody in the comments section that was blowing up about it was correct. And that's not very often that happens.
That was graciously put. Oh my goodness.
They were vindicated in this case, Patrick. They were vindicated.
Well, I'm all for vindication. So I guess the moral of the story is, if you don't test everything on the planet simultaneously, you're probably going to get your teeth kicked in by the internet. And even if you do, you might
really
get
hard
your teeth kicked in by the internet. It is. I'm doing some network benchmarking for a router for the first time in forever, right? We got the new Linksys router in. The thing weighs like 8 pounds. It's fascinating. It's amazing. And it's fascinating also for me to say fascinating one more time, because it's fascinating one more time. Fascinating. That I'm looking at people's reviews, and people's reviews on the testing show what I will affectionately call a wide range of results. In terms of it's the fastest they've seen by as much as 30%. Well, it's faster in these cases, but not in these cases. And it's one of those moments where you're like, well, benchmarks vary, and benchmark testing environments vary, and how people implement their benchmarks varies. And it's fascinating stuff. And hardware is not getting any less complicated. I mean, I would also dare to say you're going to upgrade to 337.50 when it goes final, and you may as well upgrade to it if it's in beta just to see if you have a performance improvement. Or would you advise against that?
No, I think that's fine. Yeah.
I mean, if you're a beta driver upgrading kind of, gal or guy.
The truth is beta doesn't really mean anything in the driver sense anymore. Beta just means they didn't get WICL certification in time for the release, right? And I mean, Nvidia releases more WICL drivers, non-beta drivers than AMD does. AMD seems to have a regular occurrence of beta before an actual revision comes out. And I see no issue with people upgrading to those. And if you see some performance benefits, awesome. And if you don't, well, there's some other random performance fixes and some other stability fixes probably in there as well. And I see no reason to hold back on anything like that.
There you have it. I'm going to sneeze really quickly. So do you want to tell us about the Corsair H10?
I will tell you about the Corsair H105, which is a extreme performance liquid CPU cooler that kind of continues the trend of what Corsair has done in this field. If you think about it, when Corsair starts to do something, they just go all out. Think of how many cases Corsair has now.
Right.
And now try to think of how many water coolers Corsair has now. It's a lot.
I'm going to go up to the Corsair webpage while you're telling us more about the H105, and I'm going to count how many they currently list on the website.
Fair enough. Fair enough. So the H105 is a 240 millimeter radiator. It's a double thickness. It's got a more dense fin stack in the radiator itself. It's got about $120 price tag, which is on the high side, I think, for what they have. Like you can get the H100 and the H110 for about $10 less than, although the H105 is the newest model, so that kind of makes sense as well. It's going to come with 2 of those 120 millimeter fans. It's got all the installation stuff you need, obviously. It is quite a good performer as well, but because of the more dense fins in the radiator, the noise level is a little bit higher. The air is more turbulent as it moves through the radiator itself. If you go to the second page and you look at, there's a shot that actually shows the 2 radiators side by side. You can tell the one on the left is the H100 and the one on the right is the H105, and that's going to give you an idea of the thickness difference. That improves the cooling, that improves efficiency, but it causes more noise because there's more space there you go, that's the right shot. There's more space that the air has to move through, more fins that it has to collide with, and thus causing fan noise, wind noise type of thing. I think they've improved the installation method quite a bit over previous options. They're using, I always hate is a strong word. I was always annoyed by the black installation screws and nuts and stuff like that they use, because for me, I'm putting them on and removing them fairly frequently, and that paint would kind of rub off, and it eventually kind of made it look not as good. But in terms of performance, amongst the best in the class, I think, if you look at like the overclocked results on the 4770K Haswell processor, Sebastian wrote this review up for us. It's bested only by, it actually ties load temperature with the Cooler Master side-on 240M, and is maybe 1 or 2 degrees warmer at idle, which is impressive to see. Then like I said, the only kind of drawback to it is really on the noise side. It is a little bit louder than most because of that type of stuff. But if you look at like the Cooler Master side-on that we talked about, I just mentioned, in terms of the only other one that may perform as good or as well, it is also loud because it is the same kind of build quality in terms of the fan or the fin configuration and the thickness of it too. So a pretty decent device for $120. But Sebastian does mention in his conclusion that fairly close in performance to something like the H75, which is a 120 millimeter, or is it 140? I think it might be a one. Nope, it's a 120, and it's $75. So, space considering, taking consideration of space, whether or not you have room for a 120, or if you have room, if you can actually fit a 240 in there, that may, obviously be the difference there. But I think overall pretty good a pretty good unit. And like I said, they make a lot of them. How many do they make, Patrick?
They make 8 currently from single fan. I guess basically from the H50 up through the. Oh my goodness! I just closed that web page down. Everything disappeared. The H50 quiet PC cooler starts at $65, and the thing tops out at $129.99 USD with the Hydro Series H1110 280 millimeter extreme performance liquid CPU cooler.
Wait. What was the cheapest one again there?
The cheapest one that they list on their website currently is the H50.
Oh, okay. So they
Not
just
to be
still have that
confused with
listed.
the H55. Right. Yeah. I think the H50 and 55 have been supplanted by the H60 and the H75. Not to be confused with the H80, H105, or the H100.
I wonder if this is showing all of them over the entire time they've made them or not, or if there have been EOL ones that maybe they don't have on this list anymore. This might be all of them.
I think it's close to all of them. Well, you know what? I'll go up to Amazon since that seems to be our.
If you go to Amazon, you can get a derivative with every SKU number that ever existed. It'll look like they had 60 of them then.
Wait, hold on. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Some of these are repeats.
Yeah, see, that's.
Oh, wow. There's
Amazon
the original
listing.
H70. Pictures with fans, pictures without fans, Arctic Silver.
That's the problem with Amazon listings is there could be 4 listings for the same product and you would really have a tough time.
I was going to say they're giving us 92 results, and I know for a fact there were not 92 Corsair Hydro Series water coolers.
I will vouch for that as well. There were not.
Even Corsair is not that thorough in fragmenting a market. And when I say fragmenting, I mean serving every single corner of it. Ultra Speed DDR3 revisited AMD APU memory scaling. I have a feeling this is a look at what happens when you bundle your system memory, your GPU memory, and an APU, and you throw stupid fast memory at it.
Good call.
What about so Sebastian wrote this up in our review of the Kingston HyperX Predator 2666 megahertz kit. We discovered what those knowledgeable about Intel memory scaling already knew. For most applications, specifically games, there is no significant advantage to increases in memory speed past the current 1600 megahertz DDR3 standard, which is a polite way of saying spend all the money you want on faster memory. It ain't gonna make your game frame rate refreshes. It's spend all the money you want. It's not going to give you much of a noticeable boost, and nothing you're going to notice without running a benchmark. Enter in AMD's top APU, the A10 7850K, with the Kingston HyperX 2666 megahertz memory. What did Sebastian find out? Was it a glorious increase in performance?
It actually is much better than I think most people suspect. It may be something we've talked about before. Faster memory means much more to an AMD APU in terms of integrated graphics performance than it does with Intel, or really with any kind of CPU benchmark, even on the AMD side. The integrated graphics portion of an AMD processor is much the legacy that these GCN-based designs come from, being that they are discrete GPUs, they are built for super high memory bandwidth capability. So then when they bring them down onto a processor and put them onto an APU, they still have that same hunger for memory, right? And any additional bandwidth you can give it, it will take advantage of it. If you look at the graphics benchmarks pages, he looks at results at like 1366 by 768 and kind of low quality settings, and then 1080p settings. And pretty much across the board, you're seeing like increases in the Thief benchmark at the low preset 13 by 7. At DDR3 1600, you average 20 frames per second. But at DDR3 2500, you average 28 frames per second. So you're going from 20 to 28 frames per second. That's a really, really, really healthy jump, right? We're talking about a, what is that, 40% increase in your gaming frame rate. And that actually scales almost as good, at 1080p as it does as 13 by 7. And he tests Thief and Metro and a couple of other games in there as well. It's impressive to see the amount of scaling you get from faster memory, because we're used to faster memory not really meaning jack for computing.
Right. Well, and
this is
I
the
just want to point
lone standpoint out there.
I just want to point out also, if you're looking at that benchmark, don't think the red and the blue graphs are the 1600 and the 2666.
Right.
It's the 1600s on the bottom, the 2500s on the top, and it's scaling from, 30 to 38, 19 to 25, 24 to 28.
Right.
It's kind of funny, right? Because, thief benchmark, low preset, you're going from what, 20 to 20. That's almost 40% increase.
Yep.
Taking thief at 1366 by 768 from 20.8 frames to 28.4, from 13.6 to 19. So it's not necessarily playable at 1080p, but it's certainly running much faster.
Correct.
Yeah. It's good.
It's
though.
interesting.
It's
The one caveat that comes up with all this is how much do you have to pay for that extra?
Yeah. I was about to ask, does the memory cost more than the motherboard and the APU?
It can. Actually, higher speed memory has been coming down in price. If on the last page, he talks about the pricing issue, and that, the least expensive 8 gig, 1600 megahertz DDR3 kit on Amazon at the time of the writing was only $30 less expensive than the kit he used in testing, right? Which was a HyperX kit rated at 2666. So there's a $30 delta between those two memory options. And now $30, even though that's not a lot of money, it's still enough for you to really think about what you're doing, because most of the time, if somebody's buying an APU and they're going to use the integrated graphics of that APU, they're building a budget system, right? They're not looking for highest performance possible. So that $30 difference is not a big deal if you're building like an $800 or $900 computer necessarily, but if you're building a $400 or $500 computer, now it is. So, we had this debate last night. Would it make more sense to take that $30 and invest it in a faster APU if you're not topping out the APU there? Would it make more sense to take that $30 and maybe, spend $75 on a discrete GPU and get much better performance than you'll get with the integrated graphics, right? There's debates both ways for that. But if you go down the argument of, well, I'm going to buy this DDR3 memory and I'm going to use it on this APU build for now, then maybe I'm going to build a faster system later. I'm going to build a AMD FX or an Intel Core i7 system, with the Haswell refresh. I'll be able to take this memory with me and utilize it there. Then maybe spending that extra $30 makes a lot of sense in and of itself. So I was surprised, I guess, how low the delta was between the 1600 megahertz memory and the 2600 megahertz memory. So I think that's actually good news.
Cool. Yeah. Intel Haswell processors coming next month for desktop and mobile. Tim Berry wrote it up for PC Per. Refreshed line of processors based on its latest generation Haswell microarchitecture, 27 new desktop processors, 17 new mobile CPUs, 44 new processors in total. Quote, the new chips will displace the existing Haswell processors at their existing price points with small clock speed increases. So this is a minor change. It sounds very dramatic because they're replacing a whole bunch of processors. On the desktop side of things, Tim writes, the Haswell refresh lineup includes 4 new Core i7, 10 Core i5, 5 Core i3, 5 Pentium, and 3 Celeron processors. Ryan, would you like to point out the status of the cores on the Pentium and Celeron in terms of them being Haswell or not Haswell?
I think everything on this
unfortunately
list,
named Pentium processor.
I think everything on this list is a Haswell part.
Yeah, which, don't think it is an aging architecture labeled Pentium. It is a brand new architecture, a relatively new architecture labeled Pentium.
I don't agree with it.
Because, it's intriguing by Intel that they're not backing away from. At the top of the line, Intel is introducing a new non-K part called the Intel Core i7 4790 quad-core 8-thread processor clocked at 3.6 gigahertz with 8 megabytes of L3 cache. And I think if I look closely enough, that's common. Is that $503? Boy, that graphic is really small. $300.
If you click it, it becomes bigger.
It did become bigger. $303? Yeah. $378? $303. $303. Even I can afford that.
The ones on the right-hand side are for laptops. The ones on the left-hand side are for desktops. The only thing that I point out here is I don't see any K-series processors listed, which is interesting. I don't think they're dropping K-series parts. So I don't know exactly what that means, if they're just not on this list or they are holding those back for a different launch period or something. I honestly don't know. But I don't think they're going away. So people that are looking for unlocked processors, I don't think you have to worry about them disappearing.
So it's getting to be a good time to buy a new desktop part again. Man,
yeah, I think so.
Maybe it's time to, if I didn't, if it wasn't for upgrading, the motherboard and the memory, I would be really tempted to upgrade my Core i7-920. Oh my goodness. It's going to be a great freaking summer for buying laptops though. I just love Haswell and laptops. Interesting article. I think you'd already seen it by the time I forwarded it along, Ryan. Ars Technica estimates Steam sales and hours played. If you want to see some really good reporting in a really creative way, Kyle Orland over at Ars Technica started looking at the stats he could get inside of Steam, right? Because video game sales are notoriously private. There's a couple professional organizations, companies, whatever you want to call them, marketing teams that track video game sales. And you could argue about how accurate they are, not accurate. But what they do all have in common is that if you pay company X for their estimate of game sales, they get really upset if you share those numbers. And occasionally companies will talk about hitting a major milestone or something, but you really have no idea what people play. And this is really interesting. The opening graph on the story right now, I can tell you about 37% of the roughly 781 million games. This is really good. Look at the most owned games on Steam. If you could, Josh, scroll down to the next one on that where it's a mixture of orange and green, right? So these are millions of games. Look at this one right now. So Dota 2, Team Fortress 2, Half-Life 2, Lost Coast. Counter-Strike Source. The green is the number, and there you see it right there on the screen if you're watching on video, are the people who have never played it, but they own it, right? In the case of Half-Life 2 Lost Coast, that was kind of a beta they tossed out, kind of an extra accessory. But it's kind of crazy, like a Half-Life 2 deathmatch, 2.8 million people playing it, 8.3 million people own it but haven't played it. But 25.9 million people owning Dota 2, 20.3 owning Team Fortress 2, 8.9 million owning Counter-Strike. It's interesting to look at what people own versus what they actually play. I thought this was kind of a fascinating article also because what they did is they, they realized that they could get access to a certain amount of statistics and they only had so much resources or so much money and computing power they could afford to throw at this. And they basically applied stats to it. And it's really interesting because they were able by starting out with, basic classic statistics, the same stuff that allows pollsters to call 4,000 people and get an accurate idea of how the United States is going to vote in an election. They use that to extrapolate out ownership numbers. And then they found by getting information back from certain game vendors that their statistical estimates actually held true and were fundamentally solid. But it's pretty crazy. They're saying quote, currently the range of valid Steam community IDs extends to include about 172 million pages, right? Some people have made those private. Some of them have small gaps of invalid IDs. Quote, theoretically, if we could look at every one of those profile pages, we would have a comprehensive list of every game owned by every Steam player. And then I think one of the nicest lines I've read in a long time. Functionally, we here at Ars don't have access to that kind of computing power needed to churn through hundreds of millions of web pages in a timely manner. But I'm quite sure people at Amazon and Microsoft and Google are doing that right now. But it's really funny. We've been conducting what amounts to a rolling randomized poll of the Steam user universe for about 2 months now and have generated a generalized estimate of Steam sales and gameplay numbers. If you're kind of curious about why some games succeed and why they don't, how many people are really playing games, whether or not Steam owns the market. And one of the things they link to a couple articles. It's a really great job they do of giving you lots of opportunities to read and educate yourself about how, media is reported in terms of the movie sales or television stats like Nielsen's, it basically, people are saying Steam represents 70 to 75% of the PC gaming market in the United States. So by looking at these stats, you get a really good idea of what the most popular games on Steam are. I think that's really cool. But I am also kind of a stats geek, so that's me. But I thought it was crazy. Like if you look at total play time per registered game in hours, 37% never played.
Yeah, that's
less than one game, like 1 to 10 games take 25% of your gameplay. It's interesting. There are a lot of people that play a lot of time, on very, very specific games. So made me think a lot about.
Sorry. I was gonna say, before we move on to the sponsor, I added something in right at the end because I know this is something that you like, and I wrote it up today.
Price drop or the price or the sale on this particular item?
I'm not sure if it's a price drop or a sale, but the prices have gone down on the Intel NUC, right? So these are the Haswell based NUCs, the great model number of the D5-4250WYK, which is the
rolls
bare bones
right off
kit.
the tongue.
It does, doesn't it? It's the bare bones kit that uses the Core i5-4250U processor. It's the same processor that's in like the MacBook Air and a lot of Ultrabooks out there. The bare bones kit used to be $399, now it's $329. And if you build a whole system around it, you could do that for just about $515. And that includes if you go to the post on PCPer.com, I have kind of a breakdown of some components that you need with it. Like a 4 gig DDR3 SODIMM is $40. The Samsung 840 EVO 120 gig mSATA SSD is $109. The 802.11 AC adapter is $32. You have to buy a power cord, which is kind of annoying. That's $4. And you get up to $514 there. And if you get the Core i3 based one, you drop about $65 off of that overall price. And if you need it to be cheap and like you don't need local storage, like you can get an mSATA SSD for like $35 or $40 if you want to limit it to like 32 or 40 gigs or something like that. Just depending on if you're using it for a streaming device or a storage device. I mean, this is a machine you can use as your primary computer if you're not gaming. And it's
primary computer, a home theater PC. At least one. I think the less expensive one, has an infrared sensor built in. And of course, it's amazing how really good Bluetooth and Wi-Fi control of home theater boxes has gotten, especially if you're dealing with some of the keyboards or Harmony remotes from Logitech. I think it's
they've
great.
got HDMI. It's pretty cool. My biggest I've always loved these little boxes. The biggest complaint was always the price, right? The bare bones kind of starting price was always pretty steep, and mSATA SSDs used to be significantly more expensive than just 2.5-inch SSDs, and now they're still more expensive, but they're not as more expensive. $109 for 120 gig mSATA drive. It's pretty good, and you can get all the way up to, I think that Evo has they have a 1 terabyte version of mSATA SSD. It's 526. Not that bad. It's kind of crazy that you can get, if you look at the picture of what an mSATA SSD is, and you can get 1 terabyte of flash performance on there, is pretty impressive.
How much?
526.
That's more than I'm ready to pay for an mSATA, but I can think of at least one device in my house that would benefit from that. Twitch, TWICH. That's the email address. Well, Twitch at twit.tv is the email address. We love your questions. But before we do that, we want to take a moment to thank our sponsor, our friends over at iFixit. I am an inveterate, a long-term, a serial iFixit customer because the iFixit guides, iFixit.com. If you've never been there, it's like the free online repair manual for everything. They've got more than 10,000 repair guides. You want to fix your washing machine? There's a good chance somebody might be able to help you there. Electronics, smartphones, tablets, game consoles. They cut their teeth on Macintosh laptops, iPhones, iPods, basically give you the knowledge of how to get inside that device and repair it, and then supplying you with the parts, and then supplying you with the tools to make it easier foolproof instructions to fix all your stuff. It's really, really cool. If you shattered your iPhone screen, done that. Need to repair the red ring of death on your Xbox. My buddy Roger's done that twice. Swap the battery on your Galaxy S3. Michael did that. iFixit's got you covered with parts, tools, and repair guides. We got 2 new iFixit tools to introduce to you today: the ProTech screwdriver set and the magnetic project mat. And if I can hold this up. And if you can see it right here, the ProTech screwdriver set. I'm a big fan of nice tools, and I gotta say, I'm actually, well, I'm doing a terrible job of holding it up. And the pentalobe screwdrivers are sliding out. In fact, there went one right there. Those 3 yellow ones you're looking at right there on the screen, those are pentalobe screwdrivers. Apple's polite way of saying bite me to people who would fix their own things and make them last longer. iFixit has, well, basically given you a way around these weird little proprietary screws. 15 screwdrivers specifically chosen by the iFixit teardown team because they can handle more than 90% of electronics repairs. That's a big deal. They have a good, nice feel, black oxide tips, which basically means they will help stick to your screws a little bit. There's texture to them. It's not just shiny chrome. Fixed blade, swivel top design for added precision. Custom tool roll makes this a handy portable toolkit, so you can keep all of these in one place and find them inside of your toolbox. I like the fact that these are swivel top. I have spent hundreds of hours of my life with screwdrivers, and this is a nice screwdriver. Even nicer, lifetime warranty, $59.95.
Wow,
and the
nice.
magnetic project mat, which I would pull up, but given the fact that I nearly dropped all of the screws, my man, yeah. You know what it is? It looks like a whiteboard. It's better. This mat makes repairs easier. It's an original iFixit invention because it's magnetic. You've probably seen me, if you've ever seen me fix something on Texel, you've probably seen me with blue tape rolling it over. So imagine dropping your screws on the magnetic mat and then, as Ryan just showed you, writing what they are. Or if you want to do things in order, as you lay it out in the squares, as you pull things out, you can lay them down. This one came, then this one came, this came, then this one came. And I like the fact that you can make notes on it. Having had a yellow legal pad covered with notes and screws held down with sticky tape, I'm going to say the magnetic project mat is going to get experimented with basically in the next 24 hours in my life.
I used this when I was like tearing apart the Wii U and tearing apart the PS4, something that, you know, it's very ambitious for us. And I was trying to be very careful about what screws went back in what places. It made it much more simple. And in fact, I wish I'd had another one because I had so many screws going in so many different places. It ran out of space.
That's a lot of screws.
It is.
But for more modest acts of mayhem, definitely check out the Magnetic Project Mat 1995 from iFixit.com. Look, with iFixit, you can fix yourself. Well, with iFixit, you can fix it yourself. I should be a little more accurate there. They are not currently doing medical instructions at iFixit. They're sticking to real world stuff that's outside of your body. Pacemaker repairs could be in the future. Who knows? iFixit.com/twit for more than 10,000 free step-by-step guides. iFixit also sells every part and tool you'll need. And if you enter the code TWITCH, that's TWICH at checkout, you'll pay $10 off any purchase of $50 or more. Save $10 on this set of screwdrivers and be set for 90% of electronics repairs. The ProTech screwdriver set. iFixit.com/twit. And we want to thank iFixit for the support of This Week in Computer Hardware. And for helping me actually be able to afford to own consumer electronics, since I can't seem to own a phone without cracking the screen. Although so far, the Galaxy Note 2 has not shattered.
How much time have they spent in the hands of your children?
Very little compared to the iPhone.
See the connection?
The only time the children have damaged my phone was when I let Seamus teethe on my iPhone, and he drooled so much it came.
All right.
Yeah, that's when I started putting waterproof. Every single cracked phone screen has either been a result of me or somebody running into me. In any case,
fair enough.
iFixit.com/twit. Enter the code TWITCH. Get $10 off your purchase of $50 or more. We want to thank them for supporting This Week in Computer Hardware, and we want to thank you, each and every one of you, for listening and watching. Viewer question. We'll talk. Well, actually, we should talk about Frank with his RAID rebuild. Says, I'd like to start off by saying, great show and longtime viewer. Thank you, Frank. Pat, you were saying how much you like to have the Seagate 6 terabyte drive in your home NAS. Did you ever consider if a 6 terabyte drive did fail, how long it would take your NAS to rebuild? Here's an interesting article on the subject on network computing, or just Google, is RAID fading into the sunset?
Hold on, I'm sorry. I totally am like screwing up the episode here and pressing random buttons. Start that over. I'm trying. Sorry. I'm like, oh.
Burke, it's okay, man.
I thought you were just adding some spice to the reading of the.
No, it was a
question
total
or
TD
something.
fail on my part. I'm trying to get. This is what I'm trying to do. No.
The internet is trying to kill Burke. The internet is trying to kill Burke.
Hold on 1 second here. I can do this.
Sorry,
You
I also
can
just
do it.
moved my.
Oh, I know why. ME3. Got it. Okay, sorry. You may commence.
Pat, do you want to move your camera a little bit back?
Sorry, I can't actually. I had tried, but
It's not him. Stop.
Yeah, I can't fix it, Ryan. I'm actually centered.
Don't move. That's him.
Every time I move it, Birch loses his wings or something.
Sounds like a fun game.
Okay, muting my mic.
So we just started with the reading of that question again.
Yes, just pretend that you just came out of the commercial.
In 3, 2, we love to hear your questions. We've said it before. We'll say it again. Twitch at twit.tv is the email address, or you can tweet at Ryan Shroud or at Patrick Norton, which brings us to Frank, who's got a question about RAID rebuilds. He says, I would like to start off by saying, great show, longtime viewer. Pat, you were saying how much you like to have the Seagate 6 terabyte drive in your home NAS. Did you consider if a 6 terabyte drive did fail, how long it would take your NAS to rebuild? Here's an interesting article on the subject, and he links to a networkcomputing.com article on personal tech. That is titled, Is RAID Fading into the Sunset? Or just Google, as Frank points out, Is RAID Fading into the Sunset? Keep up the good work, Frank. And the article is really interesting because it lists links to a forum debate on storagereview.com, which is a pretty solid website, where, let's see, a person is looking in the forums to create something like a 24 terabyte or larger array. And how long it would take, basically. It was interesting because we're kind of getting into the stats of RAID 5, 6, and the rebuild time for a drive, and whether or not it was likely for another drive to fail during the extended time for a rebuild. And it was interesting. So the responses to this are kind of fascinating, right? The first one is Fast Megahertz writes, with how inexpensive huge drives are these days, I just have a mirror drive for every working drive, as in my 16 terabyte NAS. The parity calculation overhead and potential issues you bring up just aren't worth it for me to go to RAID 5 or 6. On top of that, I have a second portable mini NAS that acts as a third mirror of the entire volume, and that can be easily taken off-site. And it's funny, and he also points out that his homebrew setup has been in play for his small business for like 12 years. Another person points out, CBR Worm says, I've read the reports as well. I would say they're not dead yet. I've been migrating people to RAID 6, where in the past I would have used RAID 5. I may just be lucky, but I have not had a second drive fail during a rebuild, much less a third. Most of the arrays I've deployed are between 6 and 8 drives. Maybe that's why his luck has been good. And it's interesting when you start looking at the idea. Failure trends in a large disk drive population is what Google did, because Google kind of freaked a lot of people out when people realized that Google was using consumer grade drives because it was just so much more affordable and they so rarely failed. Continuum drops in. This topic comes up on quite a few major forums every few days, weeks, months, years. Long story short, no way. RAID is very much alive. Our storage needs are constantly growing. Customers 10 years ago, where we ran 16 by 200 gigabyte drives, today are now running 16 by 4 terabyte or more in the exact same space. For home users, if your data isn't big or isn't growing nearly as fast, well, then RAID barely made sense 10 years ago, and it still doesn't make any sense today. But for many of us, we need all the space we can get. The bigger the capacity gets, the longer it takes to rebuild, so the risk of multiple drives failing before the rebuild is complete increases. and then then people start arguing, well, in the real world where I'm working, we don't really see these secondary or tertiary drive failures. So it's kind of and then it kind of goes on and on and on and on. More people going between, well, I mirror multiple times. I don't use RAID. I use, RAID 1 mirroring. And the article is an interesting read. Jim O'Reilly writes it up on networkcomputing.com. And
I mean, do you agree with the sentiment that large arrays are becoming like less popular? I don't know if popular is the right word. But
yeah, I mean, Mr. O'Reilly's claim in the article is with SSDs straining, this is his conclusion, with that quote, with SSDs straining performance limits in cloud storage using very inexpensive drives to protect data, it looks like replication will take the lead from RAID if it has not already done so. RAID arrays won't disappear overnight, but faster object stores, open source enterprise grade software, and cheap drives all mean that the playing field is tilted towards universal storage boxes and the replication approach. And it's kind of funny, like I'm not entirely sure if, by that paragraph, if FreeNAS would be considered a RAID box, it's using ZFS and not RAID, and it's, the article basically suggests that SSDs, there it is, the advent of solids, and I'm going to quote Mr. O'Reilly again from Network Computing, quote, the advent of solid state disk made both of these options untenable. The issue is that SSDs are somewhere between fast and light speed compared to hard drives, and those parity calculations became very hard to achieve, i.e. the calculations the processor managing the RAID had to make to replicate the parity data, the data that's scattered across all the drives that is replicated, or a single drive that is replicated, or used to replicate the data on a lost drive. In addition, the cost of SSD was so high that often a configuration wouldn't just have the minimum of 6 drives that would be required to make RAID 5 feasible. Many just needed 1 or 2 drives to act as caches and the tier 0 storage for critical files. I'm playing around with a 18 or a RAID, an 8-drive RAID box that has 8 3-terabyte drives in it. I've run anywhere from 4 1-terabyte, in the last 3, 4, 5 years, anywhere from like 4 1-terabyte drives to a half dozen 3-terabyte drives. And it's interesting. I think the idea is that, cloud storage, Google Drive, the offline stuff like CrashPlan is going to supplant RAIDs. And I think maybe, I don't know, I don't think so, because the thing I like about a local RAID box is it's so much faster. If I blow out a 3 terabytes worth of data on a hard drive, it's a lot faster to bring that back on my local network than it is to bring it back from, an online cloud system. And it also is a lot faster to back that drive up than it is to back that drive up to a cloud system. Now, you could argue I could mirror a couple drives and get a lot of the redundancy, but then I end up having a whole bunch of drives to string together to create a very large storage pool. So maybe I should stop putting, 30 terabytes of movies. Well, it's not 30 terabytes, but you know what I mean? I think you figure out what works. I should probably dive back into Frank's question before I go too far off into space. Yeah, it would take a while for my NAS to rebuild. But as somebody, we've got 300 terabytes of storage times 2 in 2 different IX boxes upstairs. We've had drives fail and they've rebuilt. I like ZFS with FreeNAS. I like RAID 5. I am only intellectually understand. I have never used RAID 6, but I like parity data backup, and that may be because for a long time, when people started mirroring stuff in a long time or striping RAID, that was usually a recipe for failure because whatever killed one drive might kill both drives, and you could argue that a power spike could kill all 8 drives in that NAS box I'm playing around with at home, which is why I've got it plugged into a really cool so some really basic but really cool power protection, and that I do backstep off site. I don't know. This is, as Burke starts typing into the rundown, it'll probably say, "Dear God, please stop." I think he's typing more. We can actually lose 2 drives before all hell breaks loose. Is RAID fading in the sunset? Sure. You know what? Local storage is fading into the sub. You know what I mean? It's like, Chromebooks, right? Chromebooks and tablets are replacing notebooks running, Windows or OS 10, right? And
Right.
It's, there's just to make a long response even longer and try to end it, RAIDs are going away. And you know what? Cloud services are replacing local services. And 20 years ago, local services replaced, what was considered, server-based stuff.
Services,
You know what I mean? Yeah, the pendulum swings back and forth. If you're just storing music and maybe a couple of OS builds and lots of documents, your storage needs are really different than, say, if you've ripped several hundred Blu-ray ISOs. And so, or
if your life is storing video. If you do what Twit does, right? That's a pretty important thing.
Yeah, that's a Burke typed in. We can lose 2. We are effed if the 3rd drive fails. Look, if you can get away with mirroring a couple drives or having a simple 2-drive NAS box, that's awesome. Because I am a high resolution video fiend, I want terabytes of storage available. But
you still have it.
Yeah, and I could also say, what really used to suck is when you were migrating from when you filled a NAS box, before Drobo and what FreeNAS is doing and a lot of the modern sort of alterations. When you filled up a NAS box, in order to expand to more drives, you needed to buy a second NAS box.
Yeah.
And so you moved your first NAS box. You either did one of 2 things: either move the contents of your first NAS box onto the second larger drives on the second NAS box, or you moved the contents of left the contents of the first NAS box on the first NAS box, then started filling up the second NAS box. Usually what you do is move the contents of the first NAS box onto the second NAS box and then throw larger drives onto the first NAS box. But, I will also say, working as a video professional, I have seen storage consumed at a rate that would cause most people to just lose it. I mean, once you've seen what the bill looks like, for 100 3-terabyte drives.
It's up there. It's up there.
I also like to take a moment to apologize to Burke. That's my chin touching the mic, not my hand.
Either way, he would, yeah.
I apologize to Burke and everyone listening.
Oh.
Sean got a question about those fancy new monitors. He said, I've got a machine about 2 years ago with an i5 Sandy Bridge, 12 gigabytes of RAM and SSD for an operating system. And in the Asus GTX 770, I'm just graduating school this semester. Congratulations, Sean. And we'll be starting my first real job, and we'll obviously be getting a significant raise over what I made as a part-time worker during college. You hope, I hope, Ryan hopes, Burke hopes for you. And I want to get myself something nice. I currently have 2 monitors. Primary is a 27-inch 1080p monitor. My secondary is an old 22-inch 1680 by 1050. I like having 2 because I program and it's useful. I'm considering replacing the 22-inch flat panel with a new WQHD monitor. Do it! But was wondering if the GTX 770 I have will do well enough to play games on the WQHD at high settings. I'd prefer to keep high settings over higher resolution and would prefer not to have to buy a secondary 770 for SLI or upgrade the card in general. I really don't want to go crazy with spending, probably maxing out at about $500 to $600. Will I be able to do it, or should I be happy with my 1080p monitor in this case? Oh boy, maybe.
Let's see.
It's gonna be close for gaming.
I agree. A GTX 770 is pretty much the same performance as a GTX 680, and 2560 by 1440. I think you should buy that monitor and then use the 27-inch 1080p as your secondary. WQHD, if you want to keep like high image quality settings with that card, you may have to turn some things down, but I think the resolution increase at the same screen size is going to be really dramatic for you. You're using a 1080p 27-inch monitor. Moving to a 27-inch monitor with a 2560 by 1440 resolution is going to change a lot of how you see your games being played. And not only that, even from a productivity sense, I think if you do a lot of programming, you're managing a lot of files, and maybe you want to have 2 or 3 files up at the same time, you can see a lot more text of it. The higher resolution of that will mean a lot. I actually just today purchased, and hopefully it'll be here Monday or Tuesday, a Samsung, one of those new Samsung 4K panels that's $699. It's a 28-inch 4K panel that'll do 60 hertz. And I'm really excited about that, not just for gaming, but for productivity. How many browsers and Excel spreadsheets and Photoshop windows can I have open on one screen now and actually use it full time? I see somebody in there is asking me for a link, so I will find that for you. And it is more expensive than what you're looking to spend, probably. Right, it's a $699 panel. WQHD panels you're looking at are probably, if you're looking at the ones I'm thinking of, probably in the $350 to $400 range. If you were looking at a WQHD that's in that $600 range, you might consider this 4K. It's going to be way harder on your graphics cards, but really, really awesome for productivity. It is listed as a TN panel. I know that scares a lot of people, but the TN panels on these particular 28-inch 4K screens, it's the same one that Samsung's using, same one Dell's using, same one Asus is using. They're really, really, really good. They don't seem like TN panels, and that comes from some monitor snobs that actually saw it at CES, like Alan and Josh. So I'm excited to get this in and play around with it. And I think for Sean here, the resolution change will be well worth maybe having to turn down a couple of image quality settings in your games. I really do. Yeah. I really do. And GTX 770s, if in a couple of months, you're not satisfied with it, those make really good SLI graphics cards, and you can find GTX 770s for, I think, 300 and easily looks on the new eggs, $299, right? So, if it becomes a major problem, now that you've got this big boy job, you can spend $300 in a couple of months and upgrade and go SLI in your graphics cards, or spend and get a higher end GPU or something like that. I hate to just say spend, but I really think so many people that do PC gaming and they're enthusiasts think of the monitor last, and they should really think of the monitor first. If not first in the top 3 of things, processor, graphics card, monitor. That's kind of how, the top 3 in my book would be. Maybe SSD, but monitor is like, you see it every time. You're not using your computer, you're not using your monitor. I don't know, but I would go with the 25 by 14 panel and see a noticeable difference with what you're doing.
Yeah, it's also funny because, and it's a little higher than the WQHD monitors we've been talking about, is, Samsung's announced a 4K 28-inch or 4K 20-inch monitor, and of course the Asus link didn't come up. And it's really funny. And one of the things I find really frustrating, so many of the articles about these, just like a lot of the articles about the Dell 4K desktop monitors that went on sale or we started seeing at CES, they're not talking about the resolution rate or the resolution rate.
The Samsung
the children were up early.
So I can give you. So the Samsung panel is. This is what's really interesting about this. Sneak peek. I was going to save it until I got the monitor in.
Sorry.
It is a 60 hertz panel at 4K over DisplayPort, and it's a single stream 4K 60 hertz over DisplayPort, which means you don't have the kind of the multi-stream where you had complications of 2 images. Did the graphics card recognize it correctly? That kind of thing. From everything I've been told, this is the first available single stream 4K monitor. The Dell that you'll see out, if it's not out already, it will be out soon. That's using it. That's in like the $600 to $700 to $800 range. The Asus that's going to come out, they're all going to use this now, and we're getting away from the MST headache, which is great for users. It's bad for me and how I test graphics cards, but that's nobody else's problem but mine. It is great for consumers, and I don't want to say, I'm not going to tell anybody to go buy this yet until I get it in here and actually use it and can test it and review it and everything. But I think this is going to be like the spring, summer of, if you're willing to spend $600 or $700 on a monitor, getting 4K at high quality is going to be great. So
it'll do 60 hertz single stream.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
So the issue we had before was not that DisplayPort couldn't handle it or the graphics cards couldn't handle it. It was that the ASICs, that the scalers inside the monitor couldn't handle that much bandwidth. So they had to split it up between two. And it was actually sending 2 streams, one to each scaler, and it was displaying at the same time. Now what we have is a new scaler in the monitor. In theory, I still got to tear it open and make sure that I know what I'm talking about, that I'm looking at it. One scaler that can handle that resolution, handle all the bits, and paint it on the screen. So hopefully that was
darkness behind them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. And so for a 4K gaming on a monitor, what would be your minimum GPU right now?
Oh,
he shakes his head.
You need at least you'll need at least a 780 Ti or a single 290X to really kind of even come close to doing it. If you want to keep those high image quality settings. You could always do 4K, and maybe not always. Games like Crysis 3, you could turn the image quality down all you want, and it probably wouldn't be able to do it very well. But a lot of games, you just turn the quality down, and you can get an acceptable frame rate. But that is the headache, right? So, but one of the things that you can do, I think, again, I'm still waiting for the monitor to come in. I think it'll be here Tuesday, is with the multi-stream displays, you couldn't run at lower resolutions. And with this one, you should be able to run at a lower resolution. You should be able to run at 25 by 16 and 19 by 12, or is it? I don't know if it's a 16 by 9 or 16 by 10 panel, but in theory, you should be able to do that, right? So if you don't have the GPU horsepower to run 4K, you could say, well, okay, I'm going to run 25 by 14 or 19 by 10, scale correctly. In theory.
I do want to say to Audio Murphy in the chat room, he says 4K is totally out of reach for me and Joe Cool. Yes, but you know what? Up until a few weeks ago, that was a $3,000 monitor. You know what I mean? Like $3,000 60 hertz gaming monitor, $700 60 hertz gaming monitor, or 4K 60 hertz gaming monitor. Then all of a sudden, it's going to be $500 60 hertz gaming monitor at 4K, and then all of a sudden, hey, we're going to be looking at $300 4K monitors, and the $500 4K monitor is going to be 30 inches and running at 120 hertz.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, it'll be a $300-400 GPU to get, entry-level gaming going on 4K. At least that is the dream, the consumer, electronics adoption curve thing that seems to hold true. I'm going to stop talking before I irritate anybody else in the chat room, since apparently I had the world's longest and least pleasant NAS answer.
Don't ever listen. Don't read the comments.
I always read the comments. No. It was a deserved comment. It was a long and wandering answer. Or I should have just said, some of us are going to need RAID, others of us are not, and it really depends on how much crap you need to keep on your local network. So, and how good your connection to the internet is and will be in the future. So, because if it takes you 3 months to upload everything to backup and 2 months to download it again, that may not be as effective as you think it is for storage of large amounts of stuff, to use a highly technical term. PCPer.com. Oops, sorry.
Nope, go ahead. I was just repeating.
PCPer.com is the website for Mr. Ryan Shrout and his band of merry texters. And you can still find me at techzilla.com and DieTryin, where we actually upgraded a router with the Gargoyle OpenWRT, which is really cool. Took a $50 router and made it much better and much more secure, which is exciting. I like exciting new software upgrades, especially when they make a $50 router behave like a router that's worth much, much more. That's it for this episode of Twitch. Thank you so much for listening. I'm Patrick Norton.
I'm Ryan Shrout.
He's Ryan Shrout. There he is, on the right side of your screen, hopefully. That's the man. He's smiling. We'll see you next week on Twitch.